You may be seated. So a caveat before I begin. This is not a sermon that I wrote because I didn't know I was going to do this until yesterday afternoon. So this is Pastor Andy's sermon. If you have an issue, you have to take it up with him, not with me. It wasn't a trivial rule, this law about resting on the Sabbath that Jesus reinterprets in our gospel lesson for today. It wasn't some stupid picayune box that you had to check in order to say that you were a good Jew. It was one of the 10 Commandments. It was important for 3 reasons. First, God rested on the 7th day. Therefore, we who are made in the image of God are to rest on the 7th day too. Indeed, you may have noticed that when we do not rest, we tend to think and behave in ways that do not reflect the image of God. We get tired and grumpy and rigid and negative and whiny, and we don't make good decisions. In our own time, I think we would do well to remember God's command to rest. For how often do we find ourselves running from one thing to another, like a rabbit running in front of a coyote? Now, you all are taking rest right now. You're taking time to listen for God's presence and to pray and to worship, and that's a good thing. Also, Pastor Andy and myself wish to fully acknowledge that in this regard, we are big, fat, honking, snarking hypocrites. There's no use hiding it. Most of you all know that we have a tendency to go too fast or too long most of the time. So should we be listening to God's command just as much as anybody else? God rested. We should rest. Second reason, the people of Israel, of whom Jesus is a member and into whose family we have been adopted in our baptism, the people of Israel were once enslaved. That meant that they did not get a chance to rest. Their bodies were used like objects whose work was to be extracted with as little return as possible. Most of us individuals probably have not literally been enslaved. However, have you ever felt like it? That you were not being treated as a person, but rather that you were being used? You were once enslaved, God says in the book of Deuteronomy, but God brought you out of slavery. So savor that sweet, sweet rest. Relish the moments of slow beauty. Thirdly, the people of Judea had been occupied by foreign powers for most of the last 5 centuries. They were subject to people of a different culture who put forward a different way of understanding human dignity. So, if you were enslaved, you were not important. Your enslaver could do almost anything to you. You had no rights. And if you were free, you were a little more important. And if you were free and you owned land, you were even more important. However, if you were a citizen of Rome, you were more important still. For a citizen of Rome with land was higher than that. And a ruler or a governor or their staff were even better. And at the top stood the emperor and his favorites. And everyone got their dignity from the generosity of someone above them. We call that the patronage system. Romans thought that they were being ever so wonderful, spreading their culture and true civilization to all the backward and barbarian peoples around them. But Jewish theology holds a different view. In Jewish thinking, everyone is created in the image of God. And God insists on justice. That is, the institutions of society work with equal fairness and efficiency for everyone, whether rich or poor, famous or unknown. And at the same time, God is particularly concerned with people who have the least power: the widow, the orphan, the poor, the foreigner, people who are not citizens. Our society also differs from that of Rome. For one of our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, states it this way: "We hold these truths to be self-evident," that is, beyond debate, beyond argument, "that all men," and by all men we mean all people, and if you think it really means just men and not people, maybe we need to talk after church, that all people, everyone, is created equal. All people, rich, poor, or in between, citizen and non-citizen, living here or on the other side of the world, all people are created equal. And that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that is, rights that cannot be refuted. And among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you see, our understanding of human dignity also differs from that of Rome. But Judea in Jesus' time was occupied by Roman culture. And over the past 5 centuries, they had maintained their own cultural identity, their own understanding of what it meant to be human, by following their traditions, their practices, and their laws, like resting on the Sabbath. It was like the sweat lodge of the Plains Indians and the dances of other Indian tribes today. They maintain their understanding of themselves and their connection with God in the midst of different and an often hostile culture. Jews kept and still keep today their identity by keeping the Sabbath. And so when Jesus reinterprets the Sabbath law in the gospel for today, he is messing with a deep-seated, fundamentally important practice, not just a trivial rule. But he touches this woman who has been bent over for 18 years. Bound by Satan, Jesus says. Bound. For 18 years, she has stretched her neck upward to look anyone in the face, to even barely glimpse the blue sky or the stars. Oh, sure, she could have waited one more day till Monday, after 18 years. But Jesus says, no, today is the day. Now is the time for a miracle. And so he touches her. Now is always the time for healing, and now is always the time for freedom. Jesus doesn't throw out the Sabbath law or God's law. Jesus merely interprets God's law according to its purpose, to nurture and protect human healing and growth, where people can celebrate life and peace. That is what the law is for. We also interpret God's law according to human wholeness and life. For example, the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and the Psalms say that we are not to lend at interest to people who are poor or people of our own nation. And yet a major aspect of our economy depends on lending at interest. We find that when we regulate the lending industry appropriately, people can start businesses, they can build houses, they can have insurance of various kinds, and so on and so forth. It's not perfect, as the financial crash in 2008 showed us, but we reinterpret the law in the light of human wholeness. For example, we will marry you in the ELCA if you are divorced. Jesus says specifically that we are not supposed to get married again if we are divorced. However, we find that divorce is not as desperately dangerous for women as it was in Jesus' day, and that it is possible to have a new life and a new hope after divorce. So we interpret the law in the light of human healing and wholeness, and we will preside at your wedding. In the gospel lesson for today, Jesus calls the leader of the synagogue a hypocrite because he interprets the law about rest on the Sabbath in ways that are convenient for him, but do not provide for the healing of this woman who is bent over. Jesus says to the leader of the synagogue, "You will lead your ox or donkey, your livestock, in other words, your wealth, from the feed trough to water on the Sabbath, but oh no, not her. We can't make allowances for her. That's going too far." So in what ways might we be hypocrites today? In what ways may we interpreting God's calling in ways that are convenient to us? By refusing to allow the wholeness and healing of others. But don't worry about that. You can all relax. We are not all hypocrites. Our eyes are dim and our minds are muddled. All of us say one thing and do another. That's what the law shows us. Now, here's the good news. Jesus does not judge us according to the law. Jesus judges us according to God's grace. Jesus loves us even as hypocritical as we are. And Jesus still loves you. And so we try to do the right thing. We try to interpret God's laws in ways that fit its purpose of healing and wholeness and life. But we trust Jesus. We depend upon Jesus and the grace Jesus brings us every moment of every day to make us whole, to give us dignity, to save us. And we savor that sweet, sweet freedom to let go for a while, to take a moment, to cherish that sweet, sweet rest. Thanks be to God.